Um, yeah, Kilayim. Aleph Zayin. What? Oh no, we did Zayin.
No,
We
Aleph
did that.
Vav. We're doing yeah, review of Aleph Vav.
Aleph Vav. Okay. Horseradish and radish and mustard and
Wolf and the dog.
the wolf and the dog. Those are good too. Okay. Wolf and the dog, the wild dog and the fox, the goats and the deers, the mountain goats and the ewes, the horse and the mule and the donkey, the ass and the wild donkey, though they resemble one another, are Kilayim one with another. One may not bring a tree onto a tree, vegetable onto a vegetable, nor a tree onto a vegetable, or vegetable onto a tree. Rabbi Yehuda permits the vegetable onto a tree. One may not plant vegetables in the stump of a sycamore tree. One may not grab the root onto white cassia because it is a vegetable onto a tree. One may not plant a fig tree shoot in a citrus in order to cool it, and one may not insert a vine shoot into a melon in order to water it because it is a tree onto a vegetable. One may not put a gourd seed into a mallow in order to preserve it because it is a vegetable into a vegetable.
Okay.
Why,
Okay.
why, do we, why don't we just talk about a sycamore tree? Could it be any tree?
I think it's just because a practical case because it's got those big boughs
Yeah.
that have like um I guess in the gap between the branches and the hook in the crook of the branches you'll have gaps where it would be impossible to plant things. Not all trees have
Okay.
got that kind of structure, but yeah, any tree. Okay.
Okay.
Test. Hatomen lefes utznonas tachas hagefen. All right. So here's your situation. What you have with a lot of vegetables in the days before refrigeration. What do you do with your radishes and your turnips and whatever else that you want to preserve? You can't put them in the fridge, but if you bury them underground, they keep nice and cool.
Right.
Okay. But burying them underground it comes with some certain halakhic complications. So, for example, if they grow more, let's say, sometimes it might grow a little bit more extra or push out a couple of leaves, especially onions. Like will push out their leaves even in your drawer in the kitchen. Okay.
Right.
Um, so um, so now if they're in the ground and let's say it's a Shemitah year, does that count as Shemitah growth? And if it's Shabbos, uh, are you allowed to pull them out the ground? So these are the questions we're going to deal with over here in this Mishnah. And also, sorry, also we're dealing with Maseches Kilayim. What if this is if you buried them underneath a grapevine? Is that considered
No.
Kilayim Kerim?
No.
Okay, so here we've got the situation where he went and buried all these things. He buried some vegetables underneath a grapevine. Didn't plant them, he buried them just to preserve them. Im hayu miktas alav megulin. So now, if some of the leaves are exposed, now the leaves aren't are only important as far as Shabbos is concerned, actually, but we'll see that a little later. Eno choshesh lo mishum kilayim. He doesn't have to worry about kilayim because this is not called planting; it's called preserving. That's it. Not kilayim. Lo mishum shvis. You don't have to worry about shmita growth if it grew a little bit while it was in the ground. But lo mishum masros, and he doesn't have to add extra masros to it. Okay, but nitalim b'Shabbos, and you can pick them up on Shabbos. And that's the reason, by the way, why we had to have the leaves out there is because if they're covered with sand on Shabbos, how are you going to pick them up? Because you've got sand which is muktzeh in the way. But if the leaves are sticking out, then you can grab the leaves that are above and pull them out, and the sand just moves aside by itself. Okay, so that's why we had to have the leaves exposed. Okay. Hazoreach chita usora ka'achas. Now, what happens? We're coming into the definition of what makes you over on kilayim deraisa. If he takes 1 grain of wheat and 1 grain of barley, and plants them in one hole, hare ze kilayim. That is the avera of kilayim. Rabbi Yehuda raises the bar a little bit. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eino kilayim, that is not called kilayim, ad sheyu shtei chitim useora, or chita ushtei seorim. It's got to be something that is predominantly one, and you put a foreign entity into the other one. He's got this whole lumdus about why it's got to be two and one, not just one and one. Or chita usera ukusemes, or three different types of grain all into one whole. Um, and I believe the halacha is that Karka afal pisha nikra sadeh. Right. So it says like the Tanakama that that even one chita and one surah together is called is the Isra of Kilayim. Okay. Perek Sheni. Kol sa'a sheyesh ba rova mimin echad. Mimin acher. Okay. Um, so one of the things that happens is if you've got a like a let's say you've got a bag of wheat and oopsie some other stuff fell into it and you want to there's a seed wheat that you wanted to replant and some other species fell into it. Okay. Now just like we have with basa b'chalav you've got a bittul b'shishim. Okay, if you well, like one drop of milk falls into your fleshik pot, no, it's batal b'shishim. Now, yeah, what's the sheer bittul that we have for seeds? Um, is there um is a lot less than that because it's not we're not looking for a taste. We're looking for what's considered significant. And the reason is, first of all, we just learned in the previous Mishnah what's the sheer deraisa is one and one that you're planting together. Um, but here you've got a majority. When the intention is not to plant kilayim and there's just some foreign entities in there, that wouldn't be an issur deraisa. But Chamim wanted to prevent any. Again, you want to have a derabanan to protect it. So even if there's a majority of a big majority of one kind, they still wanted it to be a certain shear of overwhelming the the minority. Um, and they also didn't want to prohibit everything because, the accidents happen and you don't want to usher the entire lot or make a person have to go picking all of the foreign entities out of his grain and it's going to drive a person mad. The Torah was given to Bnei Adam, not to Malachim. Okay, so we have a shear of a rova b'sa'ah, which is 1/24th. Okay, if the foreign entity is less than 1/24th of the whole, you can ignore it. You can pretend it's not there and just go ahead and plant it. The question now is what happens if you have more than 1/24th of the minority species inside there? And this is where we have a machlokes tanaim. So the Tanakama says, "Kol sa'ashe yesh ba rova mimin acher yema'et." He has to reduce the quantity. In other words, either add more of the majority or pick out some of the minorities so that it drops below the threshold. Okay, and then you're good to go. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yavor. He says, sorry. Once you have a significant minority in there, it's now acquired significance, and now you have to pick out the entire lot. You can't now deliberately be mevatel. So Rabbi Yossi is very strict on this one.
Rusty is saying anything over 1/24.
Anything over 1/24th. Once you've got more than 1/24th, now you've got to remove the entire amount, the entire minority. It got to go. Bein mimin echad, bein mishnei minin, and this, by the way, is said about whether it's one min or two minim in the minority. So, so let's say your majority is wheat, and you've got let's say two different species inside there. Let's say you've got some rye and some spelt inside there, and those two combine to make the 1/24th. So even if it's like 1/50th here, 1/50th here, okay, that'll be 1/25th, 1/48th here, 1/48th there. So that would still count to make a 24th because it's foreign, altogether foreign things inside the mixture. Rabbi Shimon Omer lo amru ela mimin echad. He says no. Says Rabbi Shimon, he's the most lenient over here. He says that if you've got 1/48th of this type and 1/48th of that type, even 1/30th of this type, 1/30th of that type, they don't combine. And therefore you would be allowed to plant that, even according to Rabbi Shimon. That's a big leniency there. Chachamim omrim kol shehu kilayim b'sa'ah mitzaref lerova. It says anything that would be considered kilayim inside the sa'ah is counted towards that 1/24th. So the example that Kahati gives of is of wheat and darnel. Wheat and darnel are two different species, but they're not considered kilayim. That's what we said in like the first Mishnah. Okay, so wheat and darnel are if you had a mixture, let's say, of darnel and oats, and that mixture of darnel and oats fell into the wheat. So Chachamim would say, ignore it because the darnel is not kilayim with the wheat. The
Mhm.
Tanna however, would say no, it's a foreign mixture. The darnel kind of takes on the status of the oats, and therefore you would have to dilute it to satisfy the Tanna. All right. B'med dvarim amorim, Mishnah base. Um, Tavua b'tavua v'kitnis b'kitnis. This is talking about when you have grains that are more or less the same size, right? So when you got grain in grain or legumes in legumes. Tavua b'kitnis v'kitnis b'tavua. Um, uh, uh, at first we're saying it's whether it's grain inside legumes or legumes inside grains. However, the Mishnah comes and changes its mind over here and says, "Be'emes amru." It comes that we have a Masorah, and when we say Be'emes amru, that's going to be the halacha. Zera negina she'ena nechalin. Let's say you have garden seeds that are not eaten. So, for example, turnip seeds or something. You don't eat the seeds, you
Right.
plant them and they grow into something useful. Okay. But they're very small seeds. They're much smaller than your wheat, and therefore you need you would use fewer of these little seeds in order to sow the same sort of area as the compared to what you would with meat with wheat. So zera negina she'ena nechalin mitztarfim echad me'esrim v'arba'a benofel lebeisa'ah. They combine from with 1 in 24 of what goes into a Beit Sa'ah. In other words, you would use the shear that they would that you judge the garden seeds on is based on how many you would plant in a Beit Sa'ah. Beit Sa'ah is 50 by 50 amas, and
Mhm.
that's the area of field in which you would plant a Sa'ah of grain. Okay, but a sa'a of grain is what you would use for grain. It's a significantly smaller amount when it comes to the garden seeds. So that becomes more stringent. So you've got a smaller amount that becomes significant inside the mixture. Rabbi Shimon Omer kashem she'amru lahachmir, kach amru lahakel. But the same goes in the other direction. There's also a leniency, a pishtan. So flax, which has much larger seeds. Okay, hapishtan betvua mitzaref es echad me'esrim v'arba benofel lebeisa'ah. You need a much larger quantity of flax seed in order to invalidate, let's say, wheat, because you judge it according to the amount that would be planted in a Beit Sa'ah. So 1/24th of whatever you would use to plant in a Beit Sa'ah, it's also a kula in terms when you have plants with larger seeds. Okay,
Mhm.
we good?
Okay. Very good.
Okay, Demai.
Okay. Hey, Bob, hey. If one leaves olive trees for oil, just as they share the chulin, they also share the truma. Rabbi Yehuda says if an Israelite leaves from a priest or from a Levite olive trees for oil to share half the price, half the produce, the masteris belongs to the owners. Right? Shammai says one should not sell one's olives except to chavia. Beis Hillel says also to one who tithes, but the pious among Beis Hillel used to act in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai. And two people harvested their vineyards onto one wine press. Um, one tithes and the other does not tithe. The one who tithes his, and his part is whatever it is. Okay. Fine. And
Back
now
to
we are on
hey,
Shuvaya. Okay. Okay. Um, Gimel Gimel. If a person plucks moist onions from the marketplace and he reserves dry ones for storage time, he gives payah for those separately and for these separately. And similarly in the case of beans and similarly in the case of vineyard. The person who thins gives from what is left for what is left, and the person who plucks from one place gives what it contains for what contains for everything. Seed onions are liable to pay, but Rabbi Yossi exempts. The rectangles of onions between vegetables, Rabbi Yossi says, pay from each one, but the common say from one for all. Brothers who divided two payot, if they become partners, they give one payout. If they two purchase a tree, they give one payout. If one purchases north and one is south, this one gives payout and separately, and this one gives payout separately. If a person sells stems of trees in his field, he gives payout from each one. Rabbi Yehuda said, when the owner of the field did not leave, but if the owner of the field left, he gives payout for all. Okay. Now we're on
Peter.
to Ches. Every growth that is subject to beer is subject to shivas, but there can be a growth that is subject to shivas, but not is subject to beer. Every fish that has scales has fins, but there can be a fish that has fins but does not have scales. And every animal that has horns has split hooves, but there can be an animal that has split hooves and not have horns. Split hooves but does not have horns. Everything that requires a blessing after it requires a blessing before it, but there can be something that requires a blessing before it, but does not require a blessing after it.
Okay. And Kilayim.
Yud Gimel base. Calligraphon, whose spoon was removed, is tummy on account of its teeth. If its teeth were removed, it is tummy on account of its spoon. An applicator whose spoon was removed is tummy on account of its tip, and if the tip was removed, it is tummy on account of the spoon. A stylus whose nib was removed is tummy on account of its eraser, and if the eraser was removed, it is tummy on account of the nib. The Zomasthestra, whose spoon was removed, is tummy on account of the fork, and if the fork was removed, it is tummy on account of the spoon, and the same applies to the teeth of a tiller. The measure for all of these is as much as necessary in order to do their work. A blade that was damaged is tummy until the majority of it is removed, and if its socket broke, it is tahor. An axe whose broad handle was removed is tummy on account of its splitting blade. If its splitting blade was removed, it is tummy on account of its broad blade, and if its socket broke, it's tahor. A fire shovel whose scoop was removed is tummy since it is like a hammer. These are the words of Rameya, but there's a tummy room with tahor. And a saw whose teeth were removed, one from every two is tahor, and if there remains a sits measured in one place, it is tummy. Okay,
There's more.
one more, right? The odds, the scalpel, the plane, and the auger that would damage the tummy. If the cutting edge would remove their tahor. And all these utensils that broke in two are tummy except the auger. And the plane block alone is tahor.
Sanhedrin.
Okay, Sanhedrin. Okay, base dollar. He may wage he may wage a discretionary, I can't get this word right, discretionary war with the content of the court of 71. He may break through to make a path for himself, and no one may impede him. The king's path has no limit, and all the people plunder and place it before him, and he takes the first portion. Let him not take for himself many wives, only 18. Rabbi Yehuda says he may take for himself even many as long as they do not turn his heart. Rabbi Shimon says even one, if she turns his heart, he may not marry her. If so, why does he say, let him take for himself many wives? Even if they are like Abigail, let him not accumulate for himself many horses, only enough for his chariots. And silver and gold, let him not accumulate for himself greatly, only that to pay his troops. He writes a Torah scroll for himself. When he goes to war, he takes it with him. When he returns, he brings it back home with him. When he sits in judgment, it is with him. When he reclines, it is before him, and it is stated, and it shall be with him, and he shall read it in all the days of his life. No one may ride on a horse, no one ride on his horse, sit on his throne, or use his scepter, and no one may observe him when he takes a haircut, or when he is undressed, or when he is in the bathhouse, as is stated. You shall surely place upon yourselves a king. Do so in a manner that his awe shall be upon you. Monetary cases are judged by three. Each one chooses one judge, and they both choose another. These are the words of Mayor. However, the Kachamim say the two judges choose each other. Each can disqualify the judges of the other, and these are the words of Rav Meir. However, The sages say when one proves that their relatives are ineligible, but if they are eligible or experts, he cannot disqualify them. And each one can disqualify the witnesses of the other. These are the words of Rav Meir. However, the sages say when he proves that their relatives are ineligible, if they're eligible, they cannot disqualify them. Okay. And we have Yom. Yoma, Aleph Dalet.
Okay. Sukkah, that is.
Sukkah, I mean, Sukkah, what did I say? Yoma? It's the same color, that's why. Okay. Sukkah, Dalet Gimel. If one spread over the sheet because of the sun or under it because of the leaves dropping or spread a sheet over four parts of a bed, it is invalid. One may, however, spread it over the crossbar of a two-post bed. If one trained it over a vine or gourd, it is ivy or covered it. It is invalid. If there was more valid covering than these, and if he served them, it is valid. This is the rule. Whatever is susceptible to ritual defilement and does not grow out of the soil may not be used as a covering for the sukkah. And whatever is not susceptible to ritual defilement and does grow out of the soil may be used as covering. Bundles of straw, bundles of wood, and bundles of brushwood must not be used for sukkah covering, but all that were untied are valid, and all are fit as walls.
Okay.
Mm,
That's it.
right.
Right.
A terrific day. Enjoy, and I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Shem.
Oh, no, actually, uh, just a second.